Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be discussing repetition, one of the four main principles of graphic design. The other three being contrast, alignment, and proximity. Now there are of course other principles of design that we'll be talking about as well, many of which have a lot in common and are also used by fine artists in paintings, sculpture, etc. And that's why I went ahead and gave you that handout on the shared principles of design between fine art and graphic art. So now let's go ahead and dive right into the concept of repetition. Repetition, what is he talking about? Repetition, in terms of design, is simply putting more than one element or type of element or very similar element into a layout. And that is, well, first of all, it's too small for you to read, so let's fix that. Hope you can read that there. Hope you don't notice that I misspelled repetition. It's early. Give me a break. Haven't had enough caffeine. Anyhow, so putting more than one element or type of element or very similar element into a layout. And I'm going to talk about this more here in just a minute. But that's the definition. That's a working definition that I'm going to expand on here in just a second. But what is the purpose? The purpose of repeating something in a layout, having more than one something or having two things that look very similar, achieves a very important goal of visually unifying the layout so that all areas of the layout look like they belong together. In other words, they match. So imagine if you had I don't know, let's see here, a brochure. Yes, something about 3 or 4 pages long. And the front cover had, had a very sophisticated look. It had very cool colors, blues and greens, and they were not very loud. In other words, they had very low saturation or intensity. And, very sedate, calm, kind of a posh look. And then you open it up, and then the second page of this 4-page booklet, or however many pages we're talking about, had very bright colors, very huge lettering with very crazy fonts, and all kinds, just look, completely different. And the third page, the third and fourth pages also looked different, so that all 4 pages, or however many pages, they all looked completely like they were for something completely different. Now imagine if this entire booklet was for a single event, such as a seminar on, I don't know, something about science, or, a financial seminar or something like that. Well, we talked about earlier, and I don't like to get too much into it. I don't like categorizing, but one of the purposes of a graphic designer is to know the target audience, and target audiences, generally speaking, have a specific style. You don't make an ad that looks like an ad for a bank for I don't know. I can't think of any examples. Like I said, it's kind of early, and I still haven't had enough caffeine. But you wouldn't make a bank ad that looked like a extreme sporting ad, or vice versa. If you're trying to sell extreme sports equipment like mountain climbing gear or whatnot, you're not going to make it look like an advertisement for an investment firm, so on and so forth. I mean, it's just a fact. I'm not entirely comfortable with that myself, but it is what it is. So, having said that, if that's a 4-page or an 8-page booklet, well, the same principle, the same concept, and in fact the same rule applies even to a single page or even a single part of a page. Now, the rest of the page, if we're talking about a newspaper or a magazine, certainly going to have possibly different styles because each ad might have a different style. But your ad, your layout, whatever it is that you're doing, it all the parts of it, the upper left, the upper right, the bottom left, the bottom right, the middle, the left side, the right side, the top, and the bottom, they all need to look like they have the same style. So let's talk about style. Well, actually, let's not talk about style just yet. That's way on down the road. But at least let's talk about unifying the style. You must unify the style of the layout. Now, how can you do that? Well, first you have to learn how to spell it. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at ways or things that you can repeat within a layout. Now, your textbook gives you a pretty good list, so I'm going to kind of go over some of the things from that list. And that list is as follows. Shapes. Simple graphics like squares, circles, etc. Just little things that are kind of sprinkled in there just to add repetition. Again, to unify the design. The book gives you plenty of examples of that. Colors. For example, if you have right at the top and right at the bottom, then you've repeated a color. Using colors in separate areas of the layout, bring those areas together visually or intellectually. Alright, so going to take that type class, learn how to type. Promise you I'm going to do that this semester. Let's see here, let me give you some more room here. There we go. So you can see more of the page that I'm typing, or at least trying to type. Okay. What else can we repeat? Text. We can repeat the text. Font, size, color, styling, in other words, bold, etc. Repeat alignment. Left, right, center, etc. As a matter of fact, I did that in our previous video, which I'm going to return to here in just a second. What else can we repeat? All kinds of things. Let's see here. Value. Dark. Light. Saturation. Dull or bright. And more things will show up as we go along. So what we need to do is put something in one area, a shape, a color, or multiple combinations of these in one area of the layout, and then do the same thing for another area of the layout, and that will draw the human eye from one thing to where it's repeated somewhere else. And that brings me to something else that I want to bring up. Very important. Patterns. Humans are psychologically inclined to notice patterns. Some more than others. Right now I probably couldn't find a pattern to save my life. Like I said, I haven't had enough caffeine. But we tend to do that. We tend to look for things that are similar. And this is a psychological constant that allows repetition, or that causes repetition, to be a principle of design. We instantly look, as soon as we glance at something, we look at something and we try to find something else that's similar. And I don't know what the logic is behind that, what the psychology is behind that. I wouldn't understand it anyhow, and that's certainly way beyond the purview of this class. But be that as it is, we need to take advantage of that psychological phenomena in our layouts to tie the upper left corner with the lower right corner, so on and so forth. And that brings us into movement, which I think I've talked about before. I'm not for sure if I have or not. The path within a layout that the viewer's eyes move across from the first glance to the last look. So it's going to be aligned, say from the upper left to the upper right, or the upper left and then the lower left and then the upper right. You know, it's going to make kind of just a Z pattern or something like that, or a straight up and down pattern, something like that. There's going to be the first thing that they notice, the last thing they look at, and all the things in between. So just imagine drawing a line from the dot where they first looked at to what they looked at next, and then up to the thing that they noticed third, and then the thing that they noticed last, so on and so forth. That line with those 3 segments or whatever, that is the movement. And we use patterns to help control that movement, because remember, a layout is a story. It has a beginning, first thing noticed, a middle, main point, and an end. And that is the compulsion to do something, the action item to buy it, believe it, vote for it, donate to it, or whatever the layout is trying to get the person to do. Contact, etc. Okay. So that kind of brings the discussion of repetition out to a more general application. So now what I want to talk about next is some practical applications, and for that I'm going to switch to Photoshop. Now let's switch to Photoshop here. There we go, and like I said, you know, what day can't be improved by a little puppy? So hopefully this will get your day off to a good start, and it certainly, yeah. So here we have our previous ad, and we're going to start adding some repetition to this. Now, if you may have noticed, though, I've already got some repetition. What have I repeated here? Well, from this list, oh, by the way, I could add some other things here, like texture, depth, and some other things that will come to me as we go along here. Let's go back here and take a look at what I've already repeated from that list. I don't have any shapes except for maybe the rectangular shapes of the credit cards, but they're rectangular anyhow, but yet they are repeated. Of course, they're aligned as well. Should have mentioned that from before here. But what else do I have repeated here? Well, the most obvious is the font. It's all Times New Roman because I didn't do anything to the font when I copied it over from Microsoft Word from my supposed client, my hypothetical client. But since it's all the same font, it is repeated. Now, it's repeated so much that it becomes kind of boring, and when something is boring or not very interesting, it tends to cause the viewer to lose interest, which is why we have contrast, but we'll get to that here in just a little bit. So, that being the case, What else have I repeated? Well, I've repeated alignment. Not only is this line aligned to the left with this line, but I've repeated left alignment in this text box, with this text box, with this text box, kind of with this one, not really, and this text box. So that creates a pattern. So this is both a combination of repetition and alignment. I'm repeating alignment, which increases the alignment principle in this layout, but it also unifies this text box with this text box, with this text box, with this one, and this one. And that draws a strong line of movement. Remember, movement right there. Straight down there. So they start with the upper left. They go over here just a little bit. And human eyes are also drawn to other eyes. So what I'm hoping is they'll go straight from pet care and new patients welcome to the eyes. Matter of fact, let me just create a new line here to show you what I'm hoping the movement will be. We'll make a nice red line here. I'm hoping their eyes will go like this. Over to here, then back down to this line, over to here, then down to this text box, all the way down here. And since this shape is pointing out to the right by virtue of the fact that each line is longer out to the right than the previous line above it, then I'm hoping that they'll go over here, down to here, and down to here. So that is kind of the movement there. And quite frankly, it's way too busy. But we'll worry about that later on. Remember, this is kind of a pre-thumbnail at best. Certainly not something that I would ever actually bring to a client without putting a lot more thought and effort into it. So let me go ahead and, by the way, I don't know if you saw how I did that, but I clicked on the new layer button right here, which I don't think you can see. Let me drag Photoshop up just a little bit here. So this little thing that looks like a bent post-it note, but you still can't see it. Bring that over just a bit. Now you can see the tooltip there, the little yellow text box. That is the create a new layer button. Very important. You'll be using that button all the time. And when you do that, it creates a new layer on top of whatever layer was previously selected. In this case, it was this this text right here. So when it was selected and I hit this button, it created a new layer. And since I hadn't given it a name yet, it just basically says unnamed layer 3. But it doesn't say unnamed, it just says layer 3. I can double click on the name to change the name. I can drag it up or down to change how it's stacked on top of and other layers and below other layers. See how complete professional, see how that actually is now on top of the red line. But if I drag that back down below movement, then that repeats the concept up here. And now movement, the movement layer is on top of the text. So there you have it. Oh, and if you ever want to turn the visibility of a layer on or off, just click on the eye icon. And when the eye icon is gone and you click on the space where it was, it brings it back. So I will go ahead and turn that off for now. So we've got the font repeated, we've got the alignment repeated, but I think we can add some more repetition to this, and in fact I think we're supposed to. I've been talking about how the text is repeated. Well, it's repeated too much. So what I'm going to do is, before I even add any graphics, I'm going to start adding a little bit of conscious, intentional repetition to the text. One of the things that we can repeat in text is the font. So let's just go ahead and highlight this first line. I went to my text tool there, my type tool, and I could have just clicked on the button, but what it did was I just clicked on the T button on my computer keyboard. That's keyboard shortcut there that I want you to learn. And I'm going to highlight it just like I could any other program, any other software. I'm going to highlight that. And what I'm going to do is there's two different places on the interface where I can change the text. I can do it over here in the character control panel, which you can access by going to Window, wake up Tim, Character. Or when I've got something highlighted, the control bar up here at the top, which is used for modifying how the currently selected tool is working. I can get up here, and since the current tool is the type tool, I can change the font from up here. So let's go ahead and click on the down arrow and click on a font here. Now, I want a font that matches the personality or the emotion of what I'm trying to convey here. But before I can do that, let's go back to the marquee tool. What is the emotional payload of this ad? I keep saying that, and it's not just a buzzword, especially in something like this, a pet ad, a pet care ad. The emotional aspect of it is probably the single most important consideration that you will have, that the designer would have to make. This isn't, I don't know, an investment company ad like I talked about previously. This isn't something, this isn't a Happy Meal ad or something like that. But it is an ad that's supposed to make you feel happy. And quite frankly, if a puppy can't make somebody happy, that person just can't be happy. So the overall emotional payload of this ad is happiness. You want the viewer of this ad to be happy, and you also want them to be confident. Trust is the emotional undercurrent of this ad. When you take your beloved pet, when the viewer of this ad takes their pet to a veterinarian, they won't do it unless they completely trust that veterinarian. And that's just the way humans are. We're loving, we're compassionate. We take care of our pets. That's why we have them. So we want love and trust as the emotional payload of this layout. Correction. I said love. Well, that's understood. But we want happiness. This is a cheerful ad. This isn't an ad for a funeral home. So let's look for a font. Now getting back into my type tool. That is happy. And this reminds me of that song of Happy, which now I've completely got stuck in my head because it's one of the greatest songs of. I just love that song. I may put a link to it in YouTube now, in Blackboard. So let's find a happy font. A lot of these fonts are simply not happy at all. I do a lot of more business-related layouts. What is a happy font? Well, a happy font is not very dry and boring like the current font, which is Times New Roman. It's one of the most oldest and tradition-laden fonts there is. So let's find something that's happy, maybe a little bit whimsical. So we'll try Kristen ITC. Okay. Well, it's kind of got a childlike innocence to it. I'm kind of probably attributing more to this font than there really is. But let me just bring this down just a bit so it fits back on one line. When you change font, you'll certainly want to make sure that you don't wind up with any text overflow. Now in pre-press, you would never really want to make this bold the way I just did. But this is not a pre-press class, so I can get away with anything I want. Okay, so I've changed the font. and I don't want to spend the entire video looking for fonts and going through my font CDRs and installing new fonts. That's not what you came into this lecture looking for, me rummaging around inside my old font files, because I've actually got an entire CDR full of fonts that are not installed on this computer. But now I have one line of text that's in this font. So I've changed the font. What else can I change? Well, I don't want to change the alignment because I'm already using alignment as part of repetition, and it already establishes movement, so I don't dare mess with that. But what I can do is get here to my swatches. I'm going to click on swatches, which again, you can go to Window, Swatches, if it's not already showing up. And I'm going to click on a warm color. I'm going to turn that red. The red is a warm color. It stands out, as we like to say in the graphic design business, it pops. Bam! So now it's the first thing that they're going to notice because it's at the top, it's big, and it's red. So what I need to do well, actually, I don't even want to get to that line just yet. I want to just go ahead and give away the big secret now. Here's the big payoff. I'm going to highlight that. Change the text just a little bit. I'm going to change that to the same font at the bottom. And there we go. And I'm going to make it red as well. And a drum roll, please. And this is like the simplest, easiest way to do it. But it works, and it works beautifully. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide the guides here, so we can see the layout without any interference from the Photoshop guides. What in the world just happened? Well, I'm not talking about clearing the guides. I repeated the treatment of this text up here with the treatment down here. So I'm going to create a new line. I mean a new layer. And our movement now instantly, more than likely, subconsciously, becomes from up in the upper left-hand corner to the lower right-hand corner. But the cool thing about this is, as we do that, let me change my tool here to the brush tool, which is a tool that you'll hardly ever use. Okay, that was pathetic. As we travel, as the viewer's eyes travel from here to here along that line that I just removed, they're going to notice other things as well. So their eyes are going to kind of go like this. And of course, they're going to, well, yeah, that's good enough. They're going to do that because they're going to see all that text over there. And what I'd really like to do now, oh joy, wait for it. Since remember how I talked about how our eyes are drawn to someone else's eyes? As soon as you glance at this, of course, you're going to notice the bright red text up at the top. But what you're really going to notice next, I'd like to pretend that it's this text over here. But what's more interesting, this text over here, which is in a dull Times New Roman font, or the cute, adorable puppy. Well, you're going to notice the puppy. So what I want to do, let's find the layer with the puppy on it. I am going to do a little photographic trick here. I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and I'm going to flip horizontal. Oh my goodness, guess what just happened? Are you ready for it? Well, first of all, by moving this back over here, I've got this gap over here, which I want you to pretend that you don't notice. If this was an actual project, I would have cropped the photo so that I had no empty space showing up. But, and it's almost like I planned this back when I first started doing this. I know that the people are going to look at the puppy next. You psychologically, we just cannot not notice the puppy. We might even notice that first. I'm going to use that to my advantage. And that's one of the things that you as a graphic designer have to do. You have to use everything in the layout to your advantage. If something in the layout is working against the efficiency of the layout, change it. No exceptions, nothing. That's like taking 2 steps forward and then taking about a half a mile hike to backwards. You just don't do it. If you're competing with yourself, you'll always lose. So now what I'm going to do, let's go back up here to my other movement layer. And what's going to happen? They're going to go from here to here, but not only do we look at eyes, we tend to follow where the eyes are looking. Now, since I've reversed the puppy, and no one would know if you hadn't seen me do it, the eyes here are looking to the left, and guess where that lines up? That lines up with the text here, and since it's aligned, all aligned down the left side, it goes down to here, and this points over to here, and then we jump over to this red thing over here, and we end up like that, which is originally what I intended. Now, of course, remember how I was just talking about, don't ever work against yourself? Well, that's exactly what this is. This is over here by itself, and it's not being noticed. So this is definitely working against my layout, and in the thumbnail process, I would do some thumbnails that would stop that. But anyhow, all right. So now I'm, with the exception of this mess over here, I am really working on an effective movement in my layout. All right, so I'm going to turn that layer off as well. And that just gives you some idea of how even repeating this up here and repeating this down here can enhance, there's the word I was looking for, can enhance your movement. And everything that you should do, everything that you place, where you place it, how big it is, what color it is, how it's overlapping, everything should enhance the layout. It looks like I'm running low on time because YouTube throws a fit every time my lectures go over a half an hour here. But what I want to really quick do is just enhance my movement here, again with some more repetition. Now you notice that this line is underlined, this line is underlined, and this line is underlined. Well, I'm also going to make them the same font as above. And I'm going to make them red as well. So I'm going to repeat the styling. They're going to be bold. They're going to be red. They're going to be the same size, slightly larger. I don't know if you can hear that thing beeping at me or not. Photoshop is not happy. So I repeated that. Except I forgot to turn it red because I'm a genius. So now by creating red here, red here, red here, red here, and red here, let's make another layer and take a look at what my use my eyedropper tool here to use that same color of yellow. See how I turned the second movement layer visible again by clicking right there. That made it visible. Then I went to my, where'd you go? To my eyedropper tool. And use keyboard shortcut. It's been so long since I've actually clicked on the button. Forgot where it was. I'm going to click on a pixel to sample that color, which is now orange. I'm going to turn that layer off. Click on the new layer that's blank. And go back to my brush tool. So now I'm enhancing this part of the movement. Go ahead and delete this layer right here, or just turn it invisible. You just it doesn't hurt to keep things. If you don't think you're going to use it, just turn it invisible, and then delete it when you're done. When you're 100% sure that you're done, and when you're working in Photoshop, because you just never know. You'll delete a layer, and then you'll come back the next day and go, "Wow, I could really have used that layer." Well, it's too late now. You saved it and you close Photoshop. It's gone forever. All right. One last little thing that I want to talk about, just as kind of a little bit of a whimsical thing, because I really don't want to go over too far, is I'm going to click on a new layer. I'm going to double click on the name. I'm going to rename it Paul. And I'm going to just go to my marquee tool up here. I'm going to go to elliptical marquee. Most people that are new to Photoshop would probably use the ellipse tool. Let's go ahead and use that instead. I'm just going to draw a red oval. Then I want to make another layer. I'm not even going to bother naming it here just a second. You'll see why. I'm going to hold the shift key down while I'm drawing an oval. And that, by holding the shift key down, that constrains it to a matching width and height. So I get, instead of an oval, I get a circle instead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take layer 5, which is the circle. So watch in the lower right hand corner of your screen. I'm going to drag that down into the new layer button, and that duplicates the layer. And then I'm going to bring that new layer, which was an exact copy of the previous layer, I'm going to bring that over to the right and up just a little bit. And I think you see what's going on. Now I can do that again, dragging layer 5 copy down into the new layer to duplicate the layer and then move the layer. Or I can use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control J on a PC. And I'm going to do it one more time here. So now I've got 4 layers, each with a circle on it. And that is my horrible attempt at making a paw. Feel free to laugh, I don't blame you. And I can hold the shift key down while working with my layers so that I've got 4 layers selected. And now with my move tool, I can move all 4 at the same time. Now I'm going to combine those layers with paw. Select them all again. And I'm just going to hit Control E or merge layers. And I thought that was going to preserve the paw name, but it did not. Paw being a word that only has one W in it. But what I've got now is a layer with a paw print on it. It's rather cheesy, I know, but this is an example of what I was talking about. This ad now contains the 3 main types of elements. It has text, it has photo, and it has a little bit of artwork in it. Calling that art is a little bit generous, I know, but what I'm going to do is I am going to find something here. I'm going to use the paw print wherever up here there's the letter A. And I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, or Free Transform in this case would be better. And by holding the shift key down, I keep the ratio between width and height constant. I'm going to put this wherever I see an A, which isn't very often. And now I'm going to hit Control J again to make a copy of that layer. See how Paul copy comes over there? I'm going to put that over here. Hit Control J one more time. I'm going to bring that down here. And since this text is a little bit smaller, I'm going to use Free Transform to make it smaller as well. I'm going to go back up to the previous copy, this one up here in the word care. I'm going to make a copy of it because I want it to be larger, and you never should increase the size of something because that will cause pixelation. Then I'm going to go back up to this paw print, the little A in Sylvan. And since this A in Sylvan is the same size as the A in Animal and Care, I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to bring that right there. One more time for the A in Care. And there we go. And you're thinking, oh, Tim, that looks hideous. You know what? You're right. It does. So let's fix that. Going down to the text layer here, Sylvan Springs, and just to save time, because YouTube's going to kill me when I upload this, I'm going to go to Sylvan Springs Animal Care, and where that A is, I'm just going to hit the space bar. Now, the space that I left by replacing the A isn't as wide as the letter A was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the horizontal scaling of that space to 200%. As a matter of fact, 200 might be a little bit too much because notice how it knocked it down to the next line. So let's try 180. Let's try 170. Let's try 160. 150. 130. Not really for sure what's going on here, to tell you the truth. Okay, it was because that A got distorted somehow. I must have missed something. So let's bring that back up to 150, 160, 180 might have been about right. Then I'm just going to copy, highlight that space there. Notice that the paw showing through it is actually not part of the text. That's just Photoshop being kind of weird. Here I've got a little bit too much space. Always pay attention to your space between letters. If you make it too much, it starts looking like a separate word. So here I have complete professional pet care. And this is kind of risky, but the human eye, generally speaking, we know what that word is, even if it's missing one of the letters. And that's why I chose A, because it's used very infrequently at the top and very infrequently at the bottom. So I'm going to go down to the next text here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hit the space bar, and I'm going to increase the width of that empty space here. I'm going to copy and paste it there. And I'm just going to hit the space bar a couple of times because I'm running way low on time here. Oops, I forgot an A. So here I've repeated a graphic, and I need to work on the spacing right around through here, whatnot. And one reason why this is very dangerous is because I've just eliminated a letter from the client's actual name. In retrospect now, I don't think I would have actually done that, but I'm way over time now, so I don't have time to fix it. But now you can see that I've got repetition of a graphic as well, and I've repeated the color of that graphic, and I repeated the size of that graphic. So I do have quite a bit of repetition in here, although it needs about twice as much. But anyhow, that is an overview of repetition, and I hope that you have read the book. If not, please read the chapter on that. I'm not sure what chapter repetition is. I believe that is chapter 4. And we'll talk to you soon. And I think we'll do contrast next.